So I think everybody is here. Thank you, everybody. I'm glad everybody had a safe, or at least safe enough to get back here 4th of July weekend. I appreciate it. I said this last time, but as we call to order the meeting, thank you for your time. I apologize last time we went over and I didn't take a break, and so I'm sorry for that. So we'll just plan on a break at 7 o'clock plus or minus a couple minutes, if that makes sense to everybody. We've got not a long agenda, but a lot of beef to it. So let's call our meeting to order. And the second item is a consideration of approval of the meeting minutes from July 1st of 2024 that are in your packet.
We do have 2 corrections on there. We do number 6. Yeah, so on number 6, that should say, instead of and, it should say and. And then on number 7, it should say, the city cannot run a support campaign. Just those 2 quick edits.
Thank you, Casey. Does anybody else have any other corrections or comments to the minutes?
Make a motion to approve subject to the changes Casey said.
Thank you, Brian Blundell. And second, thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. Do I have to do roll call on that? Did we say that? We do. Thank you, Jay. All right. We got a piece of paper with all our names on it. All right. Roll call vote of the approval of the meeting minutes. Brian Blundell.
Yes.
James Buxton.
Yes.
Sean Conrad.
Yes.
Philip Frang.
Yes.
Bud Graham.
Yes.
Marcus Jones.
Yes.
Kristen Kilgore.
Yes.
Koju.
Yes. Good job with them.
Vowels were never my thing.
You
got 4 of them in like 6 letters. Jay Lemon.
Yes.
Caleb McCallum.
Yes.
Jennifer Miller.
Yes.
Josh Moore.
Yes.
Todd Oberdeen.
Yes.
Craig Perry.
Yes.
Brandon Rader.
Yes.
Joe Raines.
Abstain was absent.
Thank you. Janelle Randall's absent. Richard Wright.
Yes.
Michelle Schaefer.
Yes.
Rick Smith.
Yes.
Kristen Strecker.
Yes.
Brett Town.
Yes.
Clint Thompson.
Yes.
And Party Watkins is absent. And the chair votes yes. All right. The third item on our agenda is discussion and consideration of mill levy and term between authorizations. And I've got, you have the same spreadsheet we've seen before. You bring that up. Thank you very much, Jane. And I'm not even sure the magic formula to go through this process or the next item on identifying the project items, but I think the best way to do it is have Chris, can you come up and just remind us of your numbers and the assumptions you made about ad valorem growth. I don't know if anybody saw the article in the paper today that Oklahoma County median value of residential property has tripled since 2000 in Oklahoma County. So it was timely. Also, the other day, there was an opinion piece by someone in Norman about ad valorem geo bonds for municipalities, so also timely. So, and I may be the only one that still subscribes to the Oklahoma, I realize that.
I'm with you.
Chris, would you reintroduce yourself and just walk us through?
Chris Gander with VOK Securities, and also Alan Brooks about their public financial auditor. So we have looked at this the previous 2 meetings, but what you have here is we're saying you have mill levies going across the top and then years going down the left column. We're saying if you had a 5-year plan at 50 mills, you'd be able to have $108 million. Once again, this is just kind of an estimate. There's a lot of assumptions. One of the things we're assuming is 5-year bond issues, they get paid off very quickly, so less of that tax levy is going to interest and more is going to principal, so which means more project dollars. And then talked about kind of how we levy those each year, level principal, and so to keep the tax rate, the base rate, once again, we don't approve the mill levy amount. What we're approving is the dollar amount when there's an election. So we're going to, whatever you choose, we want to go a certain levy, then we're going to go out and say, okay, you're going to say a 7-year plan, then what the ballot line would be is not to issue more than $156 million in bonds. They don't mention what that mill levy is. So we kind of back into that, and it's all about the dollar amount. So I think what you guys are going to try to figure is what politically you're comfortable with or think you get passed at what tax rate, right? And then the cycle is if this passed, many communities come back and just kind of stay at that rate rate for many years. So once again, if you do 150 million, we would issue, just for simplicity, 10, 15 million every year until that credit line, for lack of a better term, was gone, that authorization. And then sometime before that. So one of the things we talked about at the last meeting, because I have used 2.5% on my growth rate, another assumption we have to use, even though historically you had 6% growth rate. So Kathy had asked me as well, reminded me, what would it look like if we did continue to grow at 6%? And so on a 10-year plan, so let's say 10 years at 15 million, 230 million, if we actually got 6% growth rate, we would issue more bonds each year to hit that target of 15 mils, and we would run out of the authorization, that 230 million. Instead of running out in 10 years, we'd run out in 8 years. So once again, it's like you kind of want to over-deliver, right? We don't want this to drag out. We want to be able to get it done quicker, and so we use some conservative estimates there. So in a nutshell, that's what it is. And obviously the bottom table is just about what effect that has on different property tax values.
So why do you use the 2.5%? Where'd that come from?
Gives a cushion. It's not we don't really extrapolate it out. So, and we could use, once again, that's why we ran it, to see what it is to 6. But when we go through this, the bonds get rated, things like that, and it's one of those questions that comes up, well, what growth rate are you using? And if they hear us say 6%, it's kind of like, because you're just boycotting it. So here we're using 2.5% on our planning purposes. It's kind of something they like to hear, because they know we're being conservative in our estimates. Yes?
Will you clarify, you mentioned that on the ballot, it will just have the max number, but not necessarily the mill levy. So a voter would have to educate themselves on what that mill levy would be to get that value?
Right, but that's a kind of a communication thing, is the bond issue package is being promoted. There's going to be, for lack of a better marketing material, says, hey, here's our target, here's our mill levy. But the reason GO bonds are popular and they have very low interest rates is because it's considered an unlimited tax GO. So if something happens and NAD went down, the tax rate would go up mathematically, right? So just because of the way the mathematics now works, you don't ever say the amount. But now I can talk more about it in detail, but I mean, ultimately, there'd probably be some taxpayer lawsuits, things like that. If the city didn't kind of keep what they communicate, even though it's not in there, it's not an illegal document, you communicated things to them, and the city needs to stay that way. And obviously, there wouldn't be another bond issue passed if the city didn't keep its obligations and kind of hit that target, or at least close to that target.
Okay.
I've got a question. Let me just pick out the number 156 million, because I like it. Is that the amount, is it grossed up or grossed down? In other words, by the time we pay the interest on it, are we paying 156 million, but the city only gets 140?
That's 156.
156, so we really pay back 180.
Right. You're paying interest on top of 156. That's the par amount that's going to be issued. It's 156 million.
So that's the amount the city gets?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
So based on that, if the mill levy itself isn't going to be on the ballot of the proposition, I mean, do we want to talk about what those numbers should be years in millage, or should we just say, hey, what's our number going to be? Should it be 150 or 200 million, and work from that rather than, figure this out when it's really not going to be pertinent?
I agree.
Yeah, so we keep going in the weeds on the millage and things, and what we're talking about, some of our last meeting, several of us, is why don't we pick our pet projects, right? See what they total up to, or what our dream deal, if that's too high, we cut it down instead of keep talking about millage, right? I know that sounds simple, but that's what the voter's gonna see.
Yeah.
They're gonna see millage.
Yeah, you see it done both ways. I mean, it's real simple. If you need to build one fire station, the fire station costs 20 million, right? That's real simple. I mean, but I feel as though what you're saying, especially when you don't have any millage in place, it's kind of working from both directions. And then it's like, okay, well, we were at 14 now, we're gonna do 6, whatever, or we need to cut projects because this is just too high.
And this, you gotta remember, this is a general election, a presidential election. It's gonna draw huge crowds. People aren't going to go into this kind of detail. right?
Yeah.
They're coming to vote for the presidential race, and this is gonna be a side.
Was it the PAC a lot? The
Pardon?
polls.
Alan, she's not.
They did the survey, PAC.
Cat and fair.
Yeah, and that's what Pat said. I mean, he's the expert on that side, right? I mean, but he said, it's all about the package you put before the voters. I mean, they were talking, that's why they think he needs to go to the November election because of what you just said. So,
I guess I'm
Do you mind reintroducing yourself?
Alan Brooks, Public Finance Law Group, financial advisor, bond counsel, legal side, financial side. I mean, we are going to make a statement when we have this election. It's not going to be part of the bond documents, but the statement's going to be made. We're targeting a mill levy of X, whether it's 14 mills or 16 mills. We're not obligated under the documents to maintain that, okay? We could go higher when we get another GO approved again. We could go lower, nobody's gonna complain about it, but it's gonna take longer to get our projects done. So I think we can't back into the number. We need a project, the dollars, and we need a term and a target millage levy. I mean, then we have a number. It's hard to I think it's hard to pick your projects and hope they add up to the number we're looking at. I would say, pick your number, okay, with those things in mind, and then start most popular down to least popular. How many of those projects can we get into these categories we're talking about? There's another thought. There's not, again, not a right answer, not a wrong answer, but you will ultimately communicate to the voters what your intent is relative to the target you're going to have on your village. Oklahoma City does it, Oklahoma Schools does it, Edmond Schools does it, everybody does it. It's part of the process, okay? Not in the legal document, part of the process.
and I think what he was saying too, I mean, the way you're talking about doing the projects, I think we're saying, the reason we're saying it the way we are is we're assumptive here that when everybody gets their project and picks the projects they feel are most important, it's going to be something higher than you're comfortable with on the side, right? That's what we're making that assumption. We don't know that's true, but we just think it's going to be such a huge number that then you're going to have to say, okay, we can't go this high, right? We want to go somewhere else.
And then can I direct a question to Kathy?
Sure.
So does the election board decide what order they go in, or does the city council put them on the ballot based on where they want them?
We'll decide that.
Okay, so it's not a variable. We can say, okay, start with the easiest one, get a yes vote first, right?
But
Yes, you can.
you basically can say, here's our proclamation, proposition 1, 2, 3, and 4. As we've talked before, outside the scope of this group, there's going to probably be a sales tax question to eliminate the termination date on 1 penny in general tax. Does that go first? Does that go behind the geo propositions? Somebody can tell us that. But yes, we dictate the order they show up on the ballot.
And how many are you thinking, 3 or 4?
Well, some of that's up to this group. So if you say we just want to do street projects, it'll be the sales tax and streets. But from the discussions we've heard, for the last several weeks, it sounds like there's going to be at least 3 and probably 4 questions on the ballot. And I'll just tell you, maybe I said this last time, the last Oklahoma City GEO bond had 11 questions, 11 different GEO propositions. So it can be lengthy. Obviously, I don't necessarily advise that, but we don't have that situation here.
Did they all pass?
They did all pass by about over 70%.
Wow.
Hey, Richard had a question. Do you still have a question, Richard?
Yeah.
Hand up.
If we're not getting hung up on millage, do we need to get hung up on maturities, or is that more of a financial decision?
What is it?
You mean the length of time between issues or the maturities of the bonds?
Ultimate maturity, 5, 7, 10.
Well, I think to the extent that drives the amount, what I would suggest is that you pick a dollar amount, or that we start going through the project list and coming up with a list of projects, and we start, let's say, I'm just throwing this out there, that we shoot for 230 million. And then when we get to about 200 million or so, and we look at our list and we see if we're happy with it or not, remember, The project list that you've seen does not include the up to 30% for unlisted projects. So we'll have to maybe do some math in our head to try to roll that into here. I think Jane may have
It's built in.
Jane's developed this great spreadsheet that we can use to do this. And you may, okay, the other thing I'm gonna just say to the group is you may not wanna have 30% unlisted. It might be much easier to have 20% or 15%. And I will tell you that is just from my past experience, that's what Oklahoma City does. And the reason they do it is because they feel like it adds voter confidence to the listed projects, that you have to do the listed projects. So the more that you list, the more the public knows what they're voting on. And you don't have this like, $500 million slush fund, quote unquote, that you could have in Oklahoma City with 30%. So what I would suggest is that we pick a number and we can raise hands and see what everybody's comfortable with, and then just start trying to plug the projects in there. And that Todd and I talked a little bit about this as we were driving over here. I think we just start going down the list, and does everybody like this one, and everybody like this one. And there's the projects that you all added that we need to address at some point. Do those get on the list? Do they not get on the list? Do we go with the list that staff created and has now, developed some more prioritization for? So that's my suggestion. So anybody have a number they want to shoot for?
I recommend 230.
I do too.
How many of you are comfortable with starting at 230? Okay. So that's 15 mils in 10 years. That would be the 15 mil target.
What happens if I'm sorry, someone had their hand up? What happens if what Chris said is correct, that the 6% is closer to reality at the end of the 8 years? When would the city then contemplate another, to your knowledge, bond issue? Would it be after 10 years, or would they do it right after?
No, you do it once. You will know within a year or two if you're going to sell all the bonds too quickly. If you're going to if it's going to be 8 years instead of 10 years, for example, you'll know that by year 7 or even 6, just because of the growth in assessed value. And then you start planning your next bond issue. So that you don't, the idea behind this is that your tax levy after this does not go down, but it doesn't go up either. That you now have this 15 mil target that you can use every 8 to 10 years to go back to the voters and say, we're going to do all these projects and we're not going to increase your taxes. And that has been what Oklahoma City has been doing. That's what your school bonds are structured as. That's what your Oklahoma City school bonds are structured as. This time they did have a big increase, but typically that's what school districts do too. And then you just sell them to fill up the difference, but you'll know, and the staff will say, okay, it's time to start planning.
I would just suggest, I didn't count, but not everybody raised their hand, so I'd be interested in the conversation. That's the reason we're here, right? Everybody's got value and time, and so I would just entertain the people that didn't raise their hand, just give us some opinions or thoughts, too low, too high, or whatever the conversation. Yes, please, bud.
To me, I feel more comfortable with 200 million. 200 million to me is a good number that someone can say, okay, this is a lot of money, it's a lot of projects, you get it done in less than 10 years, and keeping it going. So the next, there's always going to be projects. So the next, it's another 200 million. We may not need 230. I think you could always use it, but you can prioritize and also think that you need to put, like you said, your 75%, and those 25% down there are some that if they're really nice to do, but they may not be the reason someone would actually mark yes to vote yes on that moment. So just a little bit lower, not much.
Clint?
So 200 million would be about 13 mil.
12, 13.
What I would suggest is that and we'll have this conversation in a minute, is that we pick a mill levy and then vary the time, vary the number of years. So like, if we're all comfortable with 15 mills, then you could do 200 million and it would be somewhere between 7 and 10 years. It'd probably be closer to 8.
And the voters aren't gonna be looking at 200 million, they're gonna look at 80 million, 124 million. They're gonna be looking at upgrade.
Yeah, they're gonna be looking at $130 million in streets, or, $160 million in streets. That's what they're gonna see.
Jay, I'm sorry, please, Michelle.
I just have a question. So say we put together 4 proposals, what if only 3 of them pass? Does that just lower the amount that we spend?
If they don't all pass, then you would still stick with that 15 mil target every year, and you would sell the bonds more quickly because you don't have the $200 million or $230 million bucket anymore. And your next bond authorization might be in 5 or 6 years.
So it just reduces by the amount that doesn't.
It just goes down, yeah.
Jay?
Mr. Chairman, I think 230 is too high, and here's why. One is it's a 10-year gig, and what's going to happen, in my opinion, politically, is that the voters are going to look at this and go, why, that's a long time. I'm going to be here that long. I'm going to let them try it out a little bit, but I want to kind of keep a pretty close eye and make sure that they're reliable, that they're going to keep their word. These projects are coming, and if we just give them 10 years to go taxes, I think we're going to get a lot of additional no votes. Because of that, I like 156 million better. 200 doesn't offend me, but I think that experimentation thing, especially when this is the first time we've ever tried to sell a GO bond, when other than the public safety center, which went down in flames.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. Jay Lemon, and then Sean, please.
I think it's tough to have a conversation for or against any of this based upon whether or not we can sell it, when we don't even know who the organization is that's going to be behind trying to market and sell this, which is a big concern of mine, but it's not our purview here. So I won't dive into that. I will say that I do think that you want, again, repeating myself, enough time that you can see progress of some of these projects being built for the voters to get confidence in the city to go forward with a second bond issue at some point in time.
Yeah, and I would just say that I'm just going to take 5 years is probably too short of a time period. You just don't see enough progress.
I also, I hear everybody's level of different numbers and for whatever reasoning and everything. I just don't think that there's a whole lot of people in the general public that have an appreciation for what any of these projects cost. And so by the time you sprinkle in annual road maintenance increase, so people can see their roads get better, I can see quality of life projects, which we've seen several pitched here already, and some of these major infrastructure intersection improvements and everything, you're going to eat up $150 million pretty darn fast, particularly if you're going to spread that out over 10 years. And anyway, I just said it.
Thank you. Sean, Conrad?
Yeah,
Todd, thank you.
so, and maybe it's, I may be the only person in the room that doesn't get this. $150 million doesn't mean anything to me. Like, $215 million doesn't mean anything to me. Maybe some of you, it means something to you, but I can't relate to that. I can relate to how much it's going to cost me as a taxpayer. So is there a way that we can educate the taxpayers on, if this is what we decide to do, here's how you calculate how it's going to affect you?
That will absolutely have to be a part of the public information piece that the city does. Definitely, usually if you have like an FAQ, the frequently asked questions, one of your frequently asked questions is, what does this do to my tax bill? And we'll have to answer that. And we'll have to be really upfront about it.
So can we do
But until you
that as
have a
part of
dollar
this?
amount, until
I'm
you
sorry.
know what the mill levy is going to be,
Yeah.
we can't calculate that.
Well, hold on a second, that might be what he's, I mean, is that That's what this second is.
That's what the second, yeah, the second part of
average home
this
is 304,000.
Right.
So this is what the tax increase would be on a 15-year, or 10-year, or I'm sorry, 10 mil, 15 mil, and 20 mil. Now on 100,000, it's not perfect math, but if you had a $200,000 home, you could just double that number, and that gets you really close to what it's going to be.
Okay, all right. Yeah, because those numbers aren't exactly proportionate. So the way those calculate, and so if I had a $500,000 house,
15 basis points.
you know, and yeah.
it'd be 700.
Clint, 1 second, Todd, Olbert, do you want
I was just gonna ask, in
Clint, and
and
then
then we had a bond oversight committee that kind of helps the projects, where does that come in? How did that fit?
Which,
Created.
like the state bond
No.
oversight,
No,
the
it's
Oklahoma
this
City.
Oklahoma City has.
They created that, boy, a long time ago.
With the map stuff, I think.
No, they created it before the map stuff. So it's been in place for a long time, and I don't know that the committee is still in place, but they had a geo bond advisory committee that met every month and really what they did is they reviewed the expenditures under the bond issue before they went to council and just kind of had an oversight role. They didn't really, I mean, they couldn't change the projects or anything because those are, mostly set out. I think they did maybe have some recommendation authority on the unlisted projects. Like if staff would come forward and say, we need to do this street improvement because we have, a failure at this intersection. We want to use our unlisted money, that would go to the bond oversight committee and they would say yes or no before it went to
And that was
council.
something the city council set up.
And the city council set that up, yeah. And Edmond could do the same thing. Hopefully it doesn't have 25 people on it, but I'm just kidding.
So who are you cutting out?
If we could just have all of you
I
come
was
back
hoping for
every
50,
month.
I thought 50 was better.
50 would be better, yes.
Clint, you had your hand up, and then I think Cujo.
Yeah, the 15 mil levy at the $304,700 average house. And if it's only 200 million instead of 231 million, the 231 million would be $40 a month increase in their tax. That's how you gotta approach these people. What's it gonna cost me? $40 a month. You can't say, oh, it's gonna cost you $487.76 a year. Just say $40 a month.
And we'll have to poll that because when Pat polled that a few months ago, they responded better to, I'm gonna make a number, $300 a year than $26 a month. That polled a lot worse than the total for some reason. And I don't understand that. I agree with you. It seems $40 a month. That's, 4 drinks at Starbucks or
I'm
something.
going out talking to people at Edmond, running into the Chamber of Commerce meetings, one thing and
Yeah.
another.
But I think when we figure this out and there's a group running a campaign, that might be something that they want to poll, at least to kind of figure out voter sensitivity to that kind of stuff. But for right now, I think, we can go back to the list of cities, but Oklahoma City's goal is 16. Broken Arrow's at about 16. I'm doing this from memory, which is really dangerous. I was pretty good. Tulsa's at 15. I think their goal may be 16 as well, maybe even higher. You're not going to hit it perfectly every year. I think we've been through that. You're going to come in mostly lower. I mean, usually we come in lower. Just because
Basis on talking to people, they say, what's it gonna cost me? I said, I don't know, around $40, $50, $60 a month.
Right.
More. So there's people out there that own a house, or they're on fixed incomes, $40 a month's gonna be tough.
Yeah.
Because they're down, because nowadays everything prices gone up. And there's other people out there not even blink an eye. I mean, it's not gonna bother us, but
Yeah, and Edmond is a younger, more affluent community than a lot of these on that list are, so you'll have a different perspective on some of those things.
When I do tax hearings, the neighborhoods that I get the most from are Nichols Hills and Rose Creek.
Thanks for serving on the Board of Adjustment.
Well, Nicholas Hills mill levy is like 30 something, so
Their total tax rate.
we could always do that. So what are we thinking? Are we, because we need to start developing a project list. I mean, it is really important that your bond counsel and your city staff have time to write the legal documents that the council has to approve on August 12th.
So let me ask a procedural question, I'm sorry, Brian.
One quick question, as we're formulating that list, I want to make sure it's very clear on the overhead. Because that is an annual number, Steve, I know where Steve is at, and Casey, I just want to make sure we all understand. If we do a 10-year deal, that's a $50 million line item, correct?
Yes.
Because- So when you're thinking about the numbers, if we do 150 million, there's a third for one line item.
That's right.
So there's a danger.
You don't have to use that number.
Well, I know, but
Yeah.
they recommended 5, so if that's what they're recommending, that's what they want. So what does that look like from an overall bond issuance? So if you're thinking $50 million for one line item, now there's a danger of doing too little. Now you do a bond issue, everybody's going, what the hell do we get?
That's right.
So why am I doing this
the
again?
risk.
Like for me, I would never vote for streets only ever. This is a quality of life under area, so we gotta think about those things.
Thank you.
So what was the last thing you said? What was the last sentence you said?
The quality of life projects, to me, we're a younger community, as was mentioned. Quality of life's a huge thing, schools, huge thing, kids, huge thing. That's what speaks to parents in the younger community.
Did you all see Edmond was just rated 6th best place to be in the United States this week?
I didn't see that.
Yeah, and so I think quality of life's important, but also our bus is in a ditch. I don't know, I don't blame any of this staff because it's happened a long time ago, but you drive around and our bus is in a ditch. I mean, it's bad. I just kind of I came back from Covell Road, just the way I'm gonna miss I-35, a mile and a half traffic from Air Depot to I-35. I'm thinking,
It's a project, it's on the list.
I know, that's what I'm saying, it's on the list, But it's also, I don't know, you can go with that big number. For me, I would go with something easy at first. The Veterans Project, I don't know if you all have walked the area out there. I think the Veterans Project is an easy one. You bundle it with some other parks, right? You get Ward 3 going. You get the people that usually say no going. It's only $8 million, right? And we bundle it with a few other parks. And we can just start with that on top of the list. And then you go to something next, and then the streets. I know streets are important, but it's so big it's gonna scare people on top of the list.
Yeah, I think so, and we'll get into the projects more specifically, because I've got some questions for staff when it comes to that. And I know there's two schools of thought, Caleb, and none's right or wrong. Alan Brooks said that a minute ago. I like to go shopping when I know what I have to spend, and then if I spend too much, then it's as opposed to going and I'll just see what I like and then see what I owe at the end. So either one of those is possible. I think I said last week, we went this order just because there's probably a 50-50 process on that. And my question procedurally, I was getting ready to ask, is in our formal open meeting activity here, I don't want to do something and then undo it. And the agenda, and I'm speaking out of ignorance, so maybe Alan or somebody, our agenda item has it going this way, but I'm not a slave to that process.
You can reorder, you just need to do that. What I would recommend, what I would remind you of is that any number that you're choosing to use for an exercise is not an official number until you have a formal vote. So you can pick a number. That doesn't mean that that's what you're committing yourself to formally until you take an actual vote. And that could be tonight or not tonight. That's where you guys will get.
And if we wanted to move to number 4 and hold off on number 3, you can do that.
So, somebody saying it out loud doesn't lock us into that idea. Brandon had a question and I have a comment and we'll see where we get. Cujo, so go ahead,
I
Brandon.
think we should start with a lower budget number because I think we're going to get hypercritical on these projects.
Okay, thank you. Cujo?
So I just ran some numbers on this thing. All I did is I drew lines. I didn't have any better information on what the priority of the project should be than what the city has. So I kind of went with that. And I just drew a couple of lines on there. And so for 160 million, you can do almost half of the traffic projects, about half of the parks projects in both fire stations. If I bump it up to 213 million, I can get about another 5 or 6 traffic projects and maybe one more park project on there. But I mean, that gets us more than half of the city's list there, depending on what number we're comfortable with. And whether it's number 3 or 8, I mean, I don't have enough info to make a decision like that. But the top priorities, we could do half of each of those categories for about 160, and then add a bit more for 213.
So what I did is I went through and highlighted the projects I thought were important, and then I added them up. So then I forgot that 5 million was per year, so my numbers are off. So I went through my list and I came up with $158 million, and then you had to add 30% or 20% to that to get you to 200 and something. My opinion is the more specificity, the better to address Jay Buxton's concern that there's an open-ended checkbook and there's more accountability. I won't take issue with the idea if I'm not going to be here in 10 years because it's like we're not paying the tax anyway. But I hear what you're saying about that concept. I did make a note about the Geo Bond Oversight Committee that might be in our recommendation to the city when we get there, when we make a presentation to the city council in August or whatever the case is. So in order to move us forward, I'm going to just suggest, because it's not binding, we work by the $230 million number. We start working through the projects, have questions for staff if we do. And if we're at 182 or we're at 225, then we discuss, hey, is it really a hard decision at this point? And that's when it will be a decision. I mean, that's my opinion, but I just want to keep us with a good open dialogue. I appreciate everybody's input, and I don't want to stifle that at all. So Brian?
I agree with that 100%. We want to talk about the percentage for undedicated projects, because I think that's where you work backwards. So if we're doing, we did 230, knock off 20%, if that's the number everybody's comfortable, whatever that number looks like, because that's the part that people are going to have questions about. We need to know that number before you get dedicated projects.
Yeah, I've got an opinion about that because of our use of the CIP, but that's irrelevant here. I want to be specific. I want to be accountable and all of those things. Kathy, you look like you're going to say something.
No.
Could someone turn down the air in here? I feel like it's like 85.
I know, they told me where this back.
I'm so sorry. So I apologize. So if that's an okay idea, and again, it's just a number until we decide, then I'd like for us to kind of move to the next item, which is working through the list, and I think there's a way to do that. I'm not smart enough to know what it is, so I would like us to have a dialogue on why and this number. I have opinions about because of schools, I've got opinions about quality of life and that kind of stuff. So, and I do have a couple questions, so if it's okay, as we start with this list, I think Steve, most of the staff are here that are relevant to that. I have just a couple questions. Casey, you have a comment.
Can Jane share with you really quick what she's built out for you guys to kind of work through this process? I think it would be very helpful.
I would love for Jane to share that with us.
Jane Robertson, Management Services Manager. So what we've built out for you is we have all the projects that staff identified. I do have all of the columns of information on the normal list of projects. I've just hid some of them for ease of visibility. And I have it where we can toggle these on and off, and it will change your total at the top right. I also have a few visualizations built out for you, so we weren't sure if you were going to set a budget and work that way or the other way, but we can change this to the 231 million you were talking about. Oh.
I don't think there was a majority of 231.
Well, Caleb's just giving us a number to work off. It could be one, I mean, someone could throw out any other number and be just as relevant. So that's all I'll say, Caleb. So.
Todd, one thing I did is I started with 156 and worked and then put it into 3 categories and figured out what roads was, what safety, parks, and then a reserve. And 63 million in roads, 9 million in safety, 71 in parks, 14 million in reserve. So it can be done, but you have to start in with a project, you have to get going, or else we'll be here 2 more nights.
Yeah. And he has to do that.
Yeah, so Caleb, I wasn't trying to dismiss or override the deal. I mean, the number is, it's going to move every time Jane clicks a box.
And
so
that's editable. And this just shows you how much has been identified or selected versus unidentified. And this percentage is what you haven't identified, so that will be your contingency. So that shows you about how much you have left.
Casey, can I ask a favor? Is there any way you can email it to us?
Afterwards?
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Any chance we could get the screen in focus?
Unfortunately,
I'm no good either way.
we can bring the house lights down if that'll help.
Yes.
You want to try that, Katie, and see if that helps? Unfortunately, we're bound by the technology that they have.
It's all good.
I wish we could make it.
This is the bottom button.
The second from the bottom on the right.
And then the far right just shows you, if you select a project, which boards that affects. So, for example, you have some that are gonna affect like 1, 3, and 4. So that's gonna show in each of those boards. So the number, if you were to add all these up, might be more than the total projects you selected, but it just depends on how many boards that project affects. So just a few visualizations to help you out. We can build more in the future if you want. But we thought these would be the most useful to start.
And one of the things I noticed is as we try to spread this around boards, but Service Lake Park is a citywide. I mean, you're gonna get everybody coming to there. Same thing up Midge Park, same thing with neighborhood improvements at parks. So there's certain things that it may have board for, but it's everybody. To start to drive this up.
Well, I think that's what Jane was just saying, that maybe the reason that the sum of the ward numbers would exceed or potentially exceed the number of projects is because some of them are multi-represented or represented in multi-wards. So thank you, Brett. I appreciate that. Anybody have questions for staff as we start to look at the projects that were not answered at the last couple meetings, or you thought up in the meantime, or anything that might be related to that?
Why didn't staff rank the other than streets? You guys rank?
They did.
They have,
They didn't do one.
Yeah, we did go back and do that on the updated, on this packet. Everything is ranked now for everything.
The packet Casey sent out on Thursday or Friday, that spreadsheet has each of the 3 categories it's ranked.
They all have rankings. And that information that's on that spreadsheet is the same information that's up here. This is just a little bit more interactive for while you work through.
So the quality of life projects on this list that start, at
Line
number
27.
27 are the rankings that staff.
Is that staff and city council from the April planning, or is that staff only?
Nope.
Staff.
But that city council stuff plays into it. Absolutely.
Yeah, they're gonna take city council's design for that.
Rick and then Todd.
So-
Question. Go ahead, Kathy.
Go ahead, no,
Go ahead.
okay.
Rick.
Yeah, I just need some clarification. We talked about it last time. I'm getting old, forgetting. The $5 million in bond proceeds that we use for overlay, would that replace the $5 million that they're now using
No.
for CIP, sales tax? So
No, it will be in addition to.
All right, I just needed that clarification.
That's what we talked about last time, when we cut that number back from what was originally in here. At your first meeting, staff agreed that they would keep doing the $5 million that they have, $5 million a year that they have budgeted right now. So this would be $5 million a year, in this thing, it's at 7 years, so it's at $35 million, which might be a good starting place. Even though I know the $231 million number was a 10-year calculation. I would be a little bit concerned that you're gonna eat up all your projects in street reserves. And you have some other pretty important things.
Thank you, Kathy. Todd.
There was a document that was issued with the last agenda that was, I think it was basically entitled, projects that are kind of overlapping with the bond, the geo bond projects. And so I'm curious to know how those particular projects are going to be addressed. So for example, it said that Pelican Bay is already listed as a CIP number, is that correct?
Yes.
So how do we deal with that kind of thing? I mean, because we're not seeing it up here.
So it'll be funded through your sales
Some of
tax.
those were not funded. It said some of them are not completely funded. And so they're looking for additional funds for those projects, but it sounds like there's already dollars committed to them. And so should those be part of this list here for us to review?
So the list that's put forward was a staff recommendation of projects that are most important to the community.
What he was asking, Andy, I think is just about, if they're identified, and most of them say there's no alternate method of funding available, but I think, and Todd, correct me, is there's a couple of them on the list that mention there's others funding for those, or at least partially. And so how does that?
So it would free up dollars, so it would allow some of the, I think that overlap between this list, this proposed list, and then the 5-year CIP list was, I have to look it up again, about $51 million was an overlap between that list.
Right.
Yeah. So if those projects are selected, then it would free up dollars it would free up sales tax dollars.
That are on the CIP.
Correct.
In
Those
the
are
CIP
future
fund.
deals that haven't been done yet.
Correct. Correct.
I'm sorry, wait a second. Steve, will you step up in just a second and have a question? Go Jay, if you don't mind, and then Jay Lemon. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
I look because I'm so confused about some of these projects here and some of the previous experience I had. And Edmond has been really good about it, Mr. Lord pointed out last week about getting federal match dollars to go over here and reduce our taxpayer cost or something. There are 3 projects that are up there that currently are on the ACOG, I think they call it TIF, local government projects. One of them, for instance, is the widening in front of North High School. Here on this project, I don't know which one that is.
Maybe it's the Holly Hill to Thomas.
Number 12.
Number 11. Okay. So it's in there, it's, how many, 9 million? That's 11. $11 million. I mean, number 11. Well, this one says that the estimated federal share is $22 million, and the estimated local share is $740,000. That's a big difference. And it needs to be done, whether it's 3 million or 12 million or 740, whatever it is. But there's also another one over here, which is the Danforth and Sugar interchange. And that also is on the ACOG list. And we've got it in here, some, 20 some odd million, whatever that was. And it's
22.5.
And it's scheduled in the 2025, has an asterisk on it, says it's not final. But it says the estimated local share is $2.5 million. Well, that's a big difference between 2.5 million and 20 million. So I'm not complaining about it, I'm just, other than the fact that I'm confused about it. Is there any, well, let me bring up the other district first. On Hopewell and Coltrane, which is that intersection they've given to us that's down on the water and, beyond help. $42 million to bring it up out of the water, make it 4 lanes and all that stuff. Well, I'm not kidding you. That's about the 8th number I've seen on that. And if we can get some ACOG dollars and deal with it at $15 or $18 million, I sure like that a whole lot better. So, all that's to wind up, here's the catch. Can we deal with net numbers to the city in some way, or what we think, or hope, or plan?
Yeah. Jay, thank you. Yeah, so you may remember Steve went through the ACOG allocation last time and about your caps per city and what percentage is available. And so I want him to explain it because I would butcher it. But Steve, do you understand what Mr. Buxton's asking?
Yeah, and I would say those projects you listed are not, we don't have any federal funding for those. Those are on a list, a wish list that we give out and it gets put out there. So we don't have any federal funding approved for those. What generally happens on road projects is we put a list out there of what we want. We update it every year. By the time we get to actually a contract or an agreement with ACOG or ODOT, that project has gone up in value substantially. Generally what happens is we don't pay 20%, we end up paying 50%, or we pay a lot more. So on a $20 million intersection project, for instance, we might fill out an application for that, they'll come back and say, great, they're gonna pay, $16 million. That can't happen to start with because the cap is $7.5 million for any one project. So we're not getting the federal dollars that you're seeing on a project like that. Say it's a $10 million project. We've got one that's right now at Kelly and Danforth that we're going through. ODOT came through and it was the very same thing. They said, we applied back when it was, so 7 years ago, things cost half as much as they do now. So every year, those road projects take 4 or 5 years to design, build, move utilities. Edmond has to pay 100% of right-of-way. We have to pay 100% of moving utilities. We have to pay, so it's a little misleading to say Edmond's only going to pay 20% and that everything else the federal share is going to pay for. That's not what ever happens. It's always a lot more than 20% that we pay. We don't know what's going to get approved. The funding formulas always change from year to year. We have no idea, other than what we have already approved for this next federal fiscal year. We've got, ITS Phase 4. We got additional money for it. We got Danforth and Kelly money. So we don't have the ability to tell, to project what we can get federal dollars from. What we can.
Well, is it safe to say that if we took 200 million,
yeah,
that if these are high list roads and high priority over the period of the life of the bond, we might hope to get, 20%?
Doesn't sound like it.
No, it depends on, so if it's the smaller projects, we can get a higher percentage. It really is that $7.5 million cap that we run into a lot, as well as kind of an annual, one city can only get 56% of the pot every year. So, and as we get bigger, it is less evident. For Oklahoma City to do it, a $7.5 million cap and getting, a total of maybe 15 million a year, that's just a drop in the bucket for them. So as cities get larger, those federal funds weigh less and less on what we can and can't do. We've, over the last 20 years, done a lot with federal funds because we've had the patience to go very slow and maximize those funds and pretty much use only those funds. So yeah, it's tough. We're not able to project what we can get.
Would you say you probably average around $2 to $3 million of ACOG money a year? Maybe $5 million 1 year and $1 million the next or something like that? Just to give Jay a ballpark.
Yeah,
we probably average 10 million a year.
Okay, so it's a 10-year bond. It'd be $100 million.
Well, that's historical too, though.
Yeah, it's difficult to project.
Well, maybe 70.
It's better.
It depends on the type, it depends on what kind of projects we want to do. ACOG has a formula, it is geared toward the federal dollars and how those need to be spent and what their priorities are. And those are not always aligned completely with ours.
So it sounds like there'd be a little confrontation like that. I don't mean to be that way.
Yeah.
What I'm concerned about is when we go sell this to Joe the voter.
Yeah.
And we're to spend $42 million on Coville and Colton. And he sees this thing that I went to online. And if for some reason it pops up there and says, oh, they're really not spending $42 million, there's going to be other things. Do we have a good answer for that? And to your credit, the city of Edmond has done a bang-up job about getting this stuff done. And I think it's an exemplary job getting this knowledge back to the city. Well, when do we close over?
We don't know the true costs until we get a contractor bill. And so these are all numbers, and everybody's got an opinion. If it's, what we have listed is, we can only guess what we can guess, right? So it's until we get to the dollar amount, if it's a $42 million job, so the numbers we give ACOG are for construction only. We look at total project costs on the list that we gave you, which includes everything else in it. The numbers are roughly all the same, but they just keep getting adjusted upward every year. So that's why if you see 8 different values, it's because it's been 8 years you've been looking at these numbers.
But the list from ACOG isn't necessarily funded.
No, those are not funded.
So I think that's the big thing, is that's just a list.
That's
It's just
it's a
another
priority
project.
list, it's something that, you know, everybody puts together a wish list, it's not, those are not approved by any means.
So when do, tell me through that. So if it's on the list and it's on the website, and you go take a look at it, it says this is the year 2024 ACOG list. Does that get funded, or how, or when, or what?
On an annual basis, we get usually, so right now, we're just getting agreements. We got an award notice, we got agreements right now for projects that are federal fiscal year starting October 2025. So we only know about a year ahead of time. ACOG has a lot of information on their site. It's not all accurate.
Yes, sir. I know,
Or some of it's just wish lists. I mean, frankly, it's just like, everybody puts a list together and then they try to get federal funding for it, but Edmond's competing with every other city in the state.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's a wish list. It's a planning wish list. Everybody puts their plans. It's a metropolitan, they're trying to look at everybody's plans and make sure, hey, this city wants to do this city wants to do this. Let's do that where this road meets that road kind of deal. So it's really in flux until we get to the, actual award of the amounts.
And I think the thing that, that we talked about last time is that you guys have been really effective at getting federal funds. And if you do get federal funds on any of these projects, it reduces the amount of bond proceeds that are needed, and that frees up bond proceeds that can drop into that unlisted category, and you can spend it on other stuff. You still have to spend it on streets, for example, but it wouldn't go away. It wouldn't, vanish into thin air or anything.
It kind of sounds like that might be a good source to fund the overlay with.
What's that?
The unlisted?
That we've got, we end up with these, that we end up with these dollars back from the federal government we didn't have to spend. We don't know how much the overlay is going to be. The city used that as needed.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you what, I did my list. I did 35 million in overlay, thinking that that's a 7-year program, and if it really went to 9 or 10, that you could use some unlisted money to make up the difference in those out years. And you'll know more in those out years than you do right now.
Hey, real quickly, thank you, Kathy. It's 7 o'clock. 3 people want to say something, and I won't forget. So Jay, Kristen, and Brandon, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we're going to come back. And I'll remind everybody that Steve Lawrence said last week that he has a 25 to 30% contingency in his numbers. Is that what you told me?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead. Thank you, Jay.
So it's really important to me that we sell this and get the schools on board. The listed priorities that you have suggested, the staff has suggested, you show an X where they're by the schools. But are there other schools that have infrastructure needs like roads, crosswalks, or anything else out there that aren't on the list that we would? I was thinking we talked about this at our first meeting. There might have been a conversation a few years back identifying some, and I don't recall seeing.
So we always have something going on as far as safety improvements in school zones, always. It is one of those things that we can get 100% federal funding for. So we're not throwing in a lot of those into this process because those are things we can easily get federal funding for. As far as other projects that are, projects that are adjacent to school, we want to make sure to show that, to show how it's effective.
Kristen?
All I was going to say is it sounds like when you talk about the ACOG or projects, the smaller projects tend to get a greater percentage covered. So is a bond issue something that we need to be a big ask and say those unreachable goals that just keep getting kicked down because we're never going to be able to afford those? Should this be the big ask instead of general housekeeping? Although I will not let go of overlay because
I think that's one way to look at it. I think what Steve was thinking is that the ACOG, the federal dollars are limited to $7.5 million per project. So on a really big project, that's gonna be a smaller percentage than it is on a smaller project.
But that's what I mean, like, should
It's just a math
should that lead us to say, here in the bond project, it should be the big projects instead of the smaller ones?
Well, I mean, I think that's one way to look at it. I think, you know, the staff's priority list is another way to look at it. And then the things that you know that, you know, like I drive down the street and I know this is a bad situation. So we took the column, we've hidden the column that shows the school proximity, but we can always bring that back if you wanted it. But it's quite a, you know, it's quite a few of them.
Brandon?
As we're going into break, I think we may be underestimating the time that's gonna be required for everybody to come to a consensus on projects, so we start that when we come back.
Yeah, so here's what I would suggest, and that's what, Brandon, thank you, perfect segue. So what I want to do as an idea, is no more than an idea, is when we come back in this room, I would prefer that we go straight down that list of infrastructure and do our best to identify the things that there is general consensus on, items, and then work our way to where there's less consensus, then move to the next category. That's my preference, and Jane will keep us a tally, I think. And my last question before we take a break is the North Coltrane 1 project that's at the bottom of your list, does that include the street improvements that the city is going to do for the park?
Yes, it does.
So you have another method to fund the park road improvements on Coltrane?
I don't think we've identified, no.
Okay, thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we will come back and you'll hear me ask Jay to rub his knuckles on the deal and we'll get going again. So I had a suggestion given to me that I agree with, that we start at the bottom. And by that I mean assess the opinion of the group on 1 or 2 fire stations and then move up. And I told that person, I don't have a preference, but that seems like an easy get, in my opinion. Fire Chief Chris Goodwin is here. If people have questions, as you saw, Deputy Fire Chief Chris Deaton was here last week. So I'm horrible with vowels tonight. Goodness gracious. With Kojak over there. So I think that's a great idea, and I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. So I would like to discuss the public safety items.
We're not called public safety.
I
mean, that thing went down in such a flame, so we should call fire station.
The Euro building. So yeah, I don't know what that, Alan is here. I don't know how that's identified on the ballot as far as the items that are identified. At least on the list we have in front of us has 2 fire stations listed. On the ballot item, does it say public safety, Alan? What does it say?
That's something we got to decide as we go forward. If they're both fire stations, we probably refer to firefighting facilities or something of that effect and then describe in more detail.
Okay. Thank you, Alan, appreciate that.
Yes. We removed one of the 3 entries that I had. We have.
Yeah, I think
He took off 1 fire station last week.
Yeah, Chris, I'm sorry, Senator over here. Deputy Chief Denton was here and mentioned the growth patterns and different things that exist in eastern Oklahoma, eastern Edmond. And Chris, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah.
Sorry, please. I missed that last one.
As we evaluated that further, looked at the timeline of the bond and everything else, we don't know the proper timing for an East Edmond station. Call volume certainly doesn't dictate that we need a station. ISO is a different matter when we look at insurance. But because of that and the fact that we didn't have an exact location, I don't want to get us into a point where we locate a station in northeast Edmond when we actually need it in southeast Edmond, and we just don't know that right now. So we've removed that one down to the other 2.
Do you want to offer any more? You weren't here last week, Chris, about the reality of 1 versus 2, and I mean not the number of stations, the number of stations.
Sure. Station 3 is our #1 priority. Station 1 is actually our older station, but we've renovated it several times over the years. Station 3 is our smallest station. It's not friendly to mixed genders of firefighters. It's very small. It's in very bad repair. It is our #1 priority, regardless if it's a GO bond or a separate project. It's the next thing that we have to do.
Josh, you have like your gun.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I like the idea of fire station #3 on this GO bond
because I think it serves a need. I think our fire department is very popular in Edmond, and I think that would be popular to voters. But also on a functional side, it's needed. And I think a story can be told, not only everything that the fire department does, but also what they do with traffic and accidents and their responses to that. And then I really like the idea, I know this isn't set in stone, but you can also use this, what they would be moving out of, if that was a possibility, for ambulance extension to that site. And that's even another story to tell with response and safety, and has to do with traffic. So I'm an advocate for Fire Station 3.
Does anybody else have any comments about anything in addition to Fire Station 3 or against that idea?
I agree, because the second fire station could be the #1 item on the next bond issue. And it gives you a selling point in that one too, Chief. And by then, you may know your east side, but if it was the first year of your next bond issue, you're not hardly missing it.
Absolutely, and we have the land for Station 3, so just as soon as we're able to secure funding, then we can go in and out. So, and that would allow the other station.
So let's check station number 3 and not 1 for now.
Let's thank Kristen Strecker for the idea starting at the bottom, by the way. So. Yes, Todd?
I just, one of the things that they have in their reports are some things that are called staff ranking and priority listing, design in progress, weighted score, whether or not it's in the strategic plan. Those are all, from my perspective, good things to know if you're trying to sell something to somebody, and yet that information hasn't been provided for these. And so I would just like to ask that we go back and take a look at that schedule for the fire department to talk about. Is this adjacent to a school? Yes, that's a great selling point, or is this part of our strategic plan for Edmond? Because I think that in the end, somebody's gonna have to sell this thing.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you, Todd. And you may remember when Steve Lawrence spoke, he mentioned several factors on the infrastructure that led them to their ranking. It wasn't just, it was based on the SHIFT program and the street strategic plan, and multiple issues were weighted at different levels as he went through there on the infrastructure side of stuff, where it was listed as streets, which I think is a bad name as well, by the way. So, thank you. So I think that was so successful. Let's look at the quality of life projects that exist. And I'm open to the floor for discussion or comments about items that are important to discuss. Philip, Frank.
One of the things I don't want us to lose sight of, a couple of these are all classified as quality of life. There's a couple in here, let me back up to Brett's earlier comment on, there's a couple, the Mid Park soccer, that are all wards. Secondly, to Brian's comment, I invite you, if you haven't ever been to any of those, and see the number of families and the number of kids that serves. But what I don't want us to lose sight of, because they're called quality of life, those are also potentially, even if secondary or tertiary, potentially big economic development, sales tax opportunities. Right now, and again, I invite you to go to Tuttle, Newcastle, Perry, any of those places, and they are 2 to 3 times the quality of ours. Okay, that shouldn't happen in Edmond. But at any rate, if we improve those, I think the opportunity to bring in more, people want to come here, but you got to give them a reason, you got to give them facilities. And so Mitch Park's pretty expensive. So is there a way that you address the amenities and the infrastructure first? Instead of 25 million, is there a way to do that for 10 or something? Or maybe address the ball fields first. But anyway, I think those are, in my opinion, they need a bump in staff evaluations.
Thank you, Phil. And Brad's here, and he can speak to if we need to. I think the economic development issue is important. 66% of citizens in Edmond don't have any school-age children. So not everybody's voting because of kids' activities, right? But he's on your board, Jenna. You don't need to support him.
I mean, grandparents, so.
I get it, I'm just saying, I'm 57, I've got 4 children, none of them are school age, and I don't have any grandchildren yet. So there is a group that is looking more for rising tide lifts all boats. I mean, why else would I vote for it, right? If it's something that really doesn't, I don't drive to Air Depot in Cobell, but I think it's important, right? Caleb, go ahead.
So this thing for you, Kathy, what you said, we have time constraints, and I'm all pro Arcadia Lake, but really listening to you, the 15 million and the 25 million, since Edmond doesn't own the land, we probably don't have time to do those, right?
No.
So
Because of the core process.
we need to take those off.
I think, I would not do the Arcadia Lake projects until you have you're a lot further along. And you may have better funding sources. Remember, you don't own the property at Arcadia Lake. So a sales tax-based funding source is gonna be easier for you to do than a general obligation bond.
So consistent with, just so everybody's keeping track at home here, the Arcadia Lake Master Plan implementation and the complete Arcadia Lake multi-use trail loop are those 2 items you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
$40 million.
Well, one says 10 and 15.
Yeah.
So 25.
10, 30, 20.
We're good with
Oh.
The outdoor sports field complex is 25, and it's the lowest priority. I don't know if you want to try to work down the list.
Well, let me ask you a question. If I can, the outdoor sports field complex, is that identified as a location or any, Brad, can you speak to why that's on the list? Because I see the one that Josh talked about last week, which is the new park at Post Road, which is the jump track or whatever. So can you give us the insight on y'all's, on that $25 million?
I would say it's ranked low because it's more of a dream. It's something that was just presented in a plan, but we don't have a location. We don't know where we would build it. We just know it was a desire out there and we wanted to get on the list. But I would be concerned about, unless it was just like an absolute priority of the council and the group, that we're gonna build this to get that done in a period of time. So that's why
And
it's,
you might need to pick a location before August 12th.
yes, and we don't own land for that right now. So that's why it's ranked at the bottom. Arcadia Lake would be higher if we own the land, it would be at the top, but we don't know. So that's why those are ranked lower than the others.
So is anybody in the room that wants to make a case for keeping the $25 million outdoor sports field complex for consideration at this time? Okay, thank you, Brad, thank you so much for being here and for your input. So let's talk about the remaining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that have not been excluded on this list.
That's the items 1 through 6 of the Veterans Memorial?
Yes, sir. That's on my list. I've got Mitch Park improvements, neighborhood park playground replacement, which is across the city from what Brad told us last week. Creek Bend Trail completion, which is a connection of the existing trail that is out by Integris Hospital. The splash pad number 3, the new park at Post Road and 2nd, which was the bike park that was discussed last week.
Pump Park.
Pump Park.
Mountain biking.
Yeah. Mountain biking. Any other names? The Service Blake Soccer Complex full renovation phase 1, and then the Veterans Memorial item. Those are the 1, 2, 3, 7 items that we haven't excluded. So let's talk about those, please. And any group, yes, Clint?
I like the idea about Mitch Park, the improvements of their ball fields and amenity, because that is a big tax draw, bringing a lot of people out of town. And it's, Mitch Park is a fantastic place as it is, and I think that'd be worth the money on that.
I agree. Does anybody have a big list that excludes that off of their list they want to talk about?
So everybody kept it on their list.
So let's click the box for that for right now. Kristen was getting ready to say something. I think I cut you off. I apologize.
No, it's okay. I was just saying, even families without children do use Mitch Park, and as long as AC Kepwick, we can't let it become the next Hafer. We have to keep it up. We have to keep Mitch Park something that Edmond can be proud of. I think neighborhood park and playground replacement, that's something that's very personal to the voters, that they can see and touch and see every day, that is making improvements. Creek Bend Trail completion, it would be really nice to have a completed trail. And splash pad 3, I think splash pad 2 just got done under
Yeah, Anderson
construction,
Park,
so
yes.
it seems like kind of a double ask. But the Post Road Street Park, that's new and exciting and can draw a bunch of new revenue. But my final push for the Veterans Memorial, I have a son that's he's going on 13, and he would love it. So I think it reaches all ages.
And it draws a lot of votes.
Yeah.
I would be for the Veterans Memorial.
That's
So,
my skill. I'll be others.
Okay, so,
Can I ask Parks about Creek Bend? I walked the Creek Bend Trail this weekend. They're already paving it. Who's paying for that? I mean, it's already cleared, the bridges are going in. I mean, why is it on there if it's already under construction? So, go ahead, you guys are leading the charge. I said it, but yeah, it's kind of.
Okay, so we got federal grant funding through ODOT. It had to be spent in a certain amount of time, so we split it into phase 1 and phase 2 so that we could use the federal grant funds and make sure we didn't lose it. So we'll have, both ends completed. We just need to complete the middle part.
So this is the middle part.
It's like, yeah, this is the middle part to complete it.
And do we have access to the land? We have title to the land, so we can do that.
We will by the time we go.
Yes.
By the time we vote on this, awesome.
so it's
By the time we build, let me tell you that.
So, okay, so thank you, Steve. Clint had a comment or question, please.
Yes, I would also like to entertain the fact that the new park at Post Road and Second Street be a viable thing for Edmond as well. There are lots of the cities building that way. It's on Route 66. It would be a showplace for Edmond as well as a well-needed facility.
Can I ask a soccer question? There seems like there's projects going on out there regularly when I'm at city council meetings, so can you tell me tell us what this number represents compared to what's happened lately, what's happening in the future?
Right now, it's about a $5 million project that's basically wrapped up. It's 2 concession stands, entryway improvements. It's a little slice of the master plan that was done. The master plan actually identifies about $30 million worth of projects. We kind of knocked that down to a number that was a little more manageable. So it would entail field improvements, lighting improvements, replacing the irrigation system, and we work closely with our soccer partners too to understand what the greatest needs are.
Rick?
We can spend more than $10 million.
Okay, Brad, along those lines, will it increase parking availability?
That's one of the priorities, and we hear that from our partners and everybody there.
But will this 10 million provide additional parking?
I can't answer that. The master plan, kind of looks at field improvements in different sections, but it would be a priority of mine to do that, and I think that's the number, not the number, but one of the top priorities of the soccer club. That's a real problem. So, and some of this, there was improvements made with this last project too, but there's more needed for sure.
And I can speak to it a little bit. I mean, it's my sister actually runs a soccer club.
Please.
Ironically, that's not what
Thanks for
I'm
disclosing the conflict there.
But that's not what I'm speaking about. What I want to speak about is the economic impact that has. I mean, quite frankly, it's one of the, soccer's a little bit different than other sports, and I'm a sports guy. I grew up playing it. My dad used to run for the city of Edmond long ago, so I know well about the youth sports. The economic impact that soccer has is there's only 4 or 5 big clubs in the state. We're one of them, which is great. We haven't expanded our capacity in youth sports when it comes to our 3 main facilities, Hafer, Mitch, or soccer. It's the 3 main sports complexes we've had first in over 30 years. Mitch will be most recent. We're getting capital. That's awesome. Love it. I'm a baseball guy. I love that. We're going to get Mitch on this hopefully, which is fantastic. And we should finish soccer before we look at expansion, which is why we should knock off when we did. The new outdoor sports. So if we can finish all 3 of those, get them up to tournament quality, which is what it said in our Victus report that we had, that we do not have a tournament quality complex in Edmond. And that's sad for a city of Edmond, what we have. EDA Janus Group did a economic development study for 1 tournament in Edmond, and it was a $7.5 million financial impact on 1 soccer tournament in the city of Edmond. It was the same weekend that Cycle 66 happened. So I think that if we can finish that out as well, that takes care of the 3 complexes as far as getting them back into good shape. Then in the future we look to expand, but that gets the 3 major ones done.
These 7 items have $61 million on them. Do you want to have a discussion about kicking one or more of those off of the list, since there seems to be a lot of dialogue in favor of the items on the list? Or you take the 61 million and let Jane check the box and see where we are with work through infrastructure? Does anybody have a problem with that? Kathy, is that reasonable to you?
Yep.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry for being patient.
Well, if you're going that route, I'd say the splash pad number 3 would be cool, but not really, since we're limited on funds.
Agree.
So you own the land, this splash pad. It would be an existing park, so it was just kind of an idea right now, we'll see if we're opening one. So we would have to identify.
You have one at Maine, Kelly, roughly, and you have one at Ted Anderson Park.
Yeah,
at
from
Rankin.
south side of town. So
I think I'd leave it on until we get the big number looked at.
It's $4 million. Thank you, but yes, one more part, you can just mention.
I would say the neighborhood park playground replacement would probably be sacrificed.
We talked about it, last week Brad mentioned that the idea, there's not really, the city has multiple parks in neighborhoods around the city. I mean, there's one on 9th Street and Jackson. And you could go in and do enhancements throughout the city for not a whole lot of money was the dialogue last week. I appreciate the comment.
Boulevard was, the one on Boulevard's absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, that was a $6 million number.
Yeah.
So it's probably not going to be.
Anyway, to get this rolling, I would say neighborhood park playground replacement.
Well, I thought I heard kind of an idea to leave all 7 of those on there for now and knock one off or 2 if we get to the infrastructure, I feel like it loses priority. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, you raised it number 2.
Yeah, not that 50.
Yeah,
So
so
it's accessible to a lot of people, and we could, knock one out a year. It enhances what we're doing already, not adding additional maintenance.
And it helps everyone believe.
So what,
that the city's trying to do
what
something.
Jane has checked on the box, for those who can't see it, we've identified fire station number 3 on the, it's a soft list, keep in mind, under the public safety, to be changed later as far as the name. And then we've
Was it helpful when we dim the lights or not? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
And then Jane has checked the box for Midge Park improvements for 25 million, neighborhood park playground replacement for 2 million, Creek Bend Trail completion for 4 million, splash pad number 3 for 4 million, new park, the pump / mountain bike park at Post Road and 2nd Street or Route 66 for 8 million, the Service Blake Soccer Complex full renovation phase 1 for 10 million, and the Veterans Memorial for 8 million. Those items are checked now, and can we slide over to the right, please?
So you just knock off the post one?
No. So you see how our wonderful system works thanks to James. So, so let's work our way now, if we could, to the top of the infrastructure list. That would be, and I think there's a lot of dialogue here. Yes, Kristen.
I wonder if it's easier to just do a quick vote of hands to figure out who maybe doesn't have one on the list so we can eliminate it sooner, or is there a way to just quickly say, this first line, raise your hand, and if it's on there, and then move to the second, it's easier than eliminate?
Well, I know this, last week, based on Mr. Lawrence's comment and recommendation, and the inability to do Coltrane and Covell in sections, he basically eliminated the $42 million item that is at the bottom of the list, Covell and Coltrane intersection improvements off the list. Does anybody have a strong opinion to keep that on the list?
I do.
You do? Okay.
I wonder if we could break it up maybe into something. I just feel like when you access all these great quality of life projects that are in the interior of the city of Edmond, you naturally exit at Covell, and then you have to span to Midge Park, the soccer fields on that road, and you get to that intersection, and it's a challenge.
Yeah, I agree. And if
And it's only gonna get more expensive.
we can only pull about 2 to 3 million out of that number as far as breaking it up. We would love to have done that. We would have done it a long time ago. So I think that one's one that it kind of has to stay where it's at, as far as we can strip off like the widening from Bryant to Coltrane or whatever, and just do the intersection. And it's still going to be about that number even. And so I think with that, and I think what I said last time is that the traffic signal we have out there now will last us about 5 to 7 years. So if we're looking at a 7 to 10 year bond type window, then it needs to happen somewhere in there. So
It's a timing, you're recommending timing for the next one.
well, if Depends on the length that we go with here. It needs to be improved in about 5 years as far as traffic. There's other reasons why to improve it, but that really is what drives a lot of things is when does the traffic get really bad? And we think that'll be 5 to 7 years where it will not be functioning well.
But doesn't it take a couple of years to design it? So if you're gonna start work in 5 years, don't you need to start in 3? I mean,
yeah, I mean, we pretty much have it designed.
I think a lot of these, they are working on it some.
Yeah.
But you can dedicate something 45 million or so to 20%, that's a number we don't.
Right.
For the design and the pre-planning stuff, so.
Yeah.
I have a quick question on that. If we don't do big projects like that, do you have hope in any budget that that will ever be accomplished?
No.
So if it doesn't,
And one thing, and we haven't really talked about this from an implementation perspective, but in order to begin these projects, they have to have all the money on hand. In order to award a construction contract, a city has to have all the money on hand. So there are instances where, you talk about breaking them into pieces, it just doesn't work because, you can maybe accumulate the money in your budget over time, but it's still gonna take a few years to get there. But there are some kind of nuances to some of the implementation of these that get, it's pretty complicated. Do we want to just start at the top of the list and start going down, or do you want to start at the bottom and go up?
Well, I tried the bottom going up and I didn't see the difference.
sorry. Is that just until we get to
I suggest you pick how many dollars you think you want to spend for road improvements and take the staff's recommendation of priorities and say how many can we get.
Well, you
And
have
see if
about
there's any
100.
hot buttons that are left not on that list because.
You have the staff's priorities on here.
Yeah.
So if you start going down the list and figure out what number you're comfortable with street resurfacing, then you've got about $160 million, and then you're out.
I personally like the idea you proposed with the 35 million as an overlay, because I do believe it'll be a shorter than 10-year deal if we get 10 anyway. So 35 is probably a good number for the overlay, is my comment about it.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. Can we stop and start at the top of the list?
Well, I don't need a motion for that, but a good suggestion will do it for you. I do want to mention one thing that I asked Steve when we broke. And this is a pet peeve of mine, and it's a pet project of mine. The idea of improving Coltrane from 2nd North to get into the new park that the city is investing $10 million in, he said that would cover that, but he could break that into pieces. Would you please expand on that? Because I think that's relevant at some level.
Yeah, so the one that's labeled Coltrane 1, is it?
Number right there, 24.
Yeah, North Coltrane Road 1, right? So that is a rather large number. It includes, a couple of miles and widening and bike lanes and things like that. So of that, it also includes kind of the widening of Coltrane north of 2nd Street, kind of the Humbuck area. We looked at that when we were looking at our proposals within Common Ground. That portion of the widening would be about $4 million. So that, if the 32 million or whatever doesn't make the list, and you wanted to include 4 million for kind of widening in front of the Common Ground proposed park, then we can do that.
Thank you.
Todd, if you were to check them all down to North University Drive, I think that's $100 million.
Which number is I'm looking on my list here?
Down to number 12.
12.
Could you check those and see what that would be?
Thank you, Brett. While you're doing that, I'd like to know people's comments about priorities relevant to congestion related to schools and or safety, because I think that's come up in several conversations during this meeting today or the last 2 times. Kathy, would you give some context, please?
We don't have the column showing, but there have been quite a few comments about, the importance of school safety, school traffic. And there are, and Todd and I talked about this for a minute, there are some projects on here that actually would impact school traffic that we may not have checked off, like, what was it, 15? Broadway to Boulevard might be one of them, because that's your Santa Fe, right?
That gets all of it.
So I think, that would only be my comment. I do think that is an issue that people care about in Edmond, when I went around and talked to a lot of people, but, and if you remember the polling that Pat did, it polls really, really well. Now, there are some school safety projects that Steve mentioned that he can keep doing that are outside of this list that they get federal money for.
So going down to 12 covers all of those.
5 of
I
them.
think number 13, yeah, 13's the last one.
Yeah.
13.
Yeah, and Midge Park, it has a school adjacency, so that was checked. That's the other two that are further down, the neighborhood parks. But the streets go, so where are we on the total? We slide over a little.
Do you do the Covell and Penn though?
You want to start with?
Well, that's another school one, right?
Covell and Penn is also in, it's a
It's
mix.
Harlan.
Unincorporated Oklahoma County does it.
Yeah, and that's why Harlan Mills for it.
Yeah, that's the intersection north by Acts too. That's.
Is 15th and Bryant one of the ones that's Memorial to the school?
15th and Bryant, capacity improvements is checked.
It is checked.
Number, line,
And Spring Creek and yeah.
So with all those that you have checked, if you go to the right, can you help me understand what those numbers are?
Okay, so we have,
If we keep going. Okay, thanks.
contact lenses, not
So a total of 185. That doesn't include any 15, 20, 25%, does it, Jane?
No.
That's just specific
projects.
expenditures.
There's no contingency.
Correct, so this shows you, if you were going to put that as your budget,
Be
that would
37
leave you about 20% contingency. That's what you have in identified.
But I thought the contingency was already built into these numbers.
It's built into the estimates
The
based on
unlisted,
project.
we're talking about,
That's unlisted
Yeah.
project.
we're talking about unlisted. So the unlisted, we divide that up proportionately, that 45 million based on the, the total per type of project. So you have like, in streets, you might have 22 million, 23 million in contingency according to this. So, this is pretty much it. You're at, at a 19.5% unlisted number.
Todd, did you want to add that 5?
I really do. I don't just 1 out of 25, I said that every week. I really do think it's important because the city does not have any other method to fund the improvement of Coltrane from Second to the Huntwick deceleration, acceleration lane. And I heard Mr. Lawrence say it's about a $4 million number. And I think it would be very important, but I'm one person, as I said. Josh, do you have an opinion or anybody?
It came up, yeah,
I knew you were shaking your head, that's why I called.
Oh, during the Uncommon Ground discussions, all the meetings at the city, there wasn't a lot of opposition in a way from Huntwick in that area. What you heard, more than anything, was just prepare for more traffic there. And so it came up a lot.
I believe Todd lives in that area. Are you gonna?
Yes. I think that's, just maybe some sort of editorial, we've made commitments as a city to put together this park. And it's going to be a challenge for the city to do that. There are 7 different entities involved with that thing. And anything that we can do to help that project is going to pay dividends. And if we don't take the opportunity to pull out that $4 million through Second and Coltrane, I think we're going to regret it. I think it's going to look bad on the city when the park opens up and there's a traffic jam there. And so I'm with you.
Reduce the contingency to
I agree
15,
with
cover on top of that.
Well, how about consider this, take the splash pad off at this point?
Yeah.
Well, I guess my question, Brett, is you have 20% of unspecified projects, just reduce that to 15.
All good options. Jane, I think, was changing the spreadsheet from 32 to 4, checking.
So it's 4 million gonna be okay? Okay, so change that 32, 362 to 4 million.
I agree with Todd, I don't live there, but just with the investment the city's made in that park, I think it would reflect badly if we didn't fix it to get the access that it's gonna be.
Is there any way we could put the word uncommon grounds on the ballot with that?
Great idea.
How?
People in Kansas that sales.
I think make sure we know it's a street improvement.
Uncommon ground street improvement. Thank you, Bud. All right, thanks, Bud, please.
Okay, so, you haven't, go ahead, sorry.
Well,
I was just gonna say, you've got 17%, 18% contingency, that's really not too bad. I think that your next decision is, do you have, is there some quality of life things you wanna take off the list to add streets? And you may not,
So
so
before
that's
that,
your recommendation.
I question why we're committing funds that are not in Edmond.
Which one? Say that again, Bud.
Covell and Penn. That's a almost $17 million, $16.5 million project. It's not in the city of Edmond.
Steve Lawrence, you want to speak to that?
So, the project is actually, includes some, we own half the intersection, half of it's in unincorporated Oakland County. Edmond goes out to the center of Penn on Covell. So, yeah. So, the schools that are out there are in Edmond city limits. It's
Not really, from what I understand, we take off on city here.
No, they're not.
No, they're not?
No, they're in Edmond.
Okay, the neighborhoods just immediately south is Oklahoma City. North is unincorporated Oklahoma County. The same thing with the west.
Okay.
So, and I think I mentioned last week, so Oklahoma County is building another roundabout at, similar to the one they have in MacArthur and 206. They're going to build one at May Avenue and 206. We're looking at one possibly at Western and Covell. And then we've talked a little bit with Oklahoma County about improvements at Penn, and roundabouts work best when they're in a series like that. So we've talked a little bit about that. It's still very early, but the improvements also include, some road widenings from out from the intersection. So if you look at the map that we have, it kind of shows what that is.
Was that total cost or is that just our portion?
That's just Edmond.
So how are the negotiations with Oklahoma City to get it done? I mean, could they say no, we say yes, and all this stuff?
It'd be Oklahoma County.
Yeah, we still have a lot of the improvements are just in it. So, and we can offset, we can do some things there to keep it all in it. But I think they're wanting to move forward.
But they would say, if we said yes, they would say yes.
We can't say that.
Okay. Can you, so it's not a big number, but the safety crossing across UCO at Second into Fink Park, is that what that is? Why is that? Is that I mean, we have a lot of crossings around UCO. Why that one? It says 2nd Street and Garland Godfrey crossing safety improvements, $1,015,000.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, so Brad Murray Engineering, so that one's from Edmond Schiff as well. It was identified as a particularly dangerous intersection. I think we had a fatality there, like 8 months ago, something like that. A lot of people travel through Fink Park to walk to campus, and the crossing is not ADA compliant or safe right now. So that's kind of where I came from.
Does that count as a school crossing even though it's a university?
Can I ask a question to Steve? So Todd and I are involved in a townhome project that ODOT is eminent domain a bunch of our land at Danforth and I-35. Why wouldn't they pay for the Danforth and Center intersection if they're doing a 4-way cloverleaf there?
It's just outside their scope. They draw their boundaries at certain areas, and that is outside. Where the new interchange will be and where it comes off pretty much makes us have to do Danforth and Sooner improvements and kind of have the signals from the off-ramps work with the signals that we would do at Danforth and Sooner.
Realistically, eminent domain isn't, and it's all done now, so that's coming quick, right?
No, it's not. That is about, they do that, right? They want to buy the land early. I think they're still 5 to 6 years out on, it's with the project to widen I-35 all the way from 2nd to Waterloo, 6 lanes. It's part of that, so it's still pretty far out on their schedule. Danforth and Sooner is one of our signals that, currently traffic backs up every night, every morning. It's a bad signal. It's got a lot of traffic issues. It's one we get a lot of calls about.
Yes, Jake?
Mr. Chairman, boy, this might take a while. Many years ago, what happened was the city was saying, well, how can we build roads fast? How come we can't keep up with our transportation needs? It always seems to be an ongoing kind of thing. So they comprised and commissioned a task force to go over and look at it. And what they did is they looked at all the projects that we need to get done. How much did it cost back in those days, 2014 or $10 or something? And what sources of funding there were within the city to do that. What they concluded was that the city of Edmond will never be able to keep up or catch up with our transportation needs as currently configured. Because the only source of funding we have for roads in the city of Edmond is capital improvements or capital projects back at that time, CIP committee now. And within that committee, roads have to compete against every other good thing going on in Edmond. Parks, trails, memorials, streetscape, things we all love, things we all. But so long as that happens, we're not going to catch up on roads. So they recommended back in 2015 that the city establish a dedicated source of funding for transportation only. I thought that's what we're doing. Now, I don't mind throwing in some shiny whistles and bells and oh gosh, and it's fun and so forth. But as far as I'm concerned, and let me confess something to you, I'm just really cheap with the taxpayers' money. And mine. So if I can figure out how to go squeeze another $1 million out of a project that we don't have to spend, I'm all. So if we go up over here at ITS, for instance, when we looked at ITS, and I was on one of the committees, they came in, they had to add $9 million. I said, well, I don't know. What is it about ITS? And you guys all know about ITS and stuff. And then they came back and said, well, if you gave us $1.5 million, we could do most of this stuff with Wi-Fi transmitters, and we could go put the fiber optic cable something or other, and we got it down to $1.5 million. So my point is, many of these projects I think can be bid or cheaped or reduced. ITS is one because I don't like it. But many of you guys do. But the question on that is, can't you do that in ITS, at least some of it? That's in way southeast Edmond. Well, we're a long way away from the stuff up in northwest Edmond, where the other ITS is. On the 2nd Street and Boulevard improvements, my eyesight failed. Was that number 7? 6. Mr. Levy just repaved that intersection 2 years ago.
Oh, good call.
Did a heck of a good job.
Jay didn't do it himself.
Just don't do that. Did a heck of a good job. I've never seen that the city absolutely has to go spend $7,185,000 on that intersection. Although it does look pretty silly. But what are we going to do? We either have to go take part of First Christian Church. That's a bad idea. Or else you go right across the street and take the Edmond Historical Schoolhouse. That's a bad idea. So, okay, so let's spend $7 million to worry about it. I'd say that ought to get scratched smooth off the list quick.
if it was me spending the city's money. So, and some of you all have better ideas than I do. My priority is spend as much money as we possibly can on good, worth the money road projects. And my top one on the list is Colville and Coltrane, because we told the voters we're gonna do that 25 years ago, and they haven't done it yet.
Thank you, Jay. I always appreciate your insight. And that's why there's 25 of us, so thank you very much. Other specific comments about any project, roadway, that are mostly on our list that's in front of us? In a minute, we're going to have the hard conversation about how much do you really want to spend, because we deferred that, you may remember, until we got our shopping cart full. So as we continue to look at this list, let's continue to have any comments. So several of you haven't spoken yet. If you have a comment, I'd love to hear from you. Even if you have spoken, I'd love to hear from you. Yes, Sean, and we'll work our way around. I promise you will not be excluded.
Okay, so I have a question with what Jay just talked about. Isn't 2nd Street Boulevard a safety issue rather than anything else?
Steve, you going to speak to 2nd and Boulevard?
A question about 2nd and Boulevard.
Is 2nd and Boulevard a safety issue more than anything else?
Yeah.
Because of what that street does?
Yeah, so it's 2nd Boulevard, it's all the way up to Main and Boulevard as well. It's a lot of it's pedestrian safety.
Okay.
Wrapped into that, a lot of it is traffic flow. We're adding a bunch of lanes, we're removing the medians on Boulevard, adding a bunch of turn lanes. It's one of those areas that as we look into the future, a more urban feel to Broadway, say from 2nd to 9th or 2nd to 15th, we're going to push more traffic to Boulevard and Kelly.
Right.
And so to do that, there's a strategy to do that. We own all the right of way. Whenever we allow, from the church, we got right of way from them in exchange for closing Jackson. We swapped right of way with them. So we've got all the right of way needed for it. It's one that can be done quickly. Get a lot of project readiness points because it's designed already. We've already done everything needed for it. But yeah, it was mainly traffic flow as well as kind of with changing the speed limits and making downtown a little bit more pedestrian. We're having to reroute people around it a little bit more. So
it's pretty important to your team because you ranked it 6 here.
Yeah, it's high on council's priority. It's high on a lot of the things that we looked at.
And I have a second question, if I can.
Please.
Last week we talked about getting behind on roads, and Jay just talked a little bit about that. Is we put 35 million, I think, into this budget. Is that enough? I mentioned it last week, and I'm going to repeat myself this week. If the voters don't see us making progress on roads, and we tell them that we're going to be working on the roads, because everybody that I talk to, and this isn't like 98%, every single person that I talk to says their number one priority is roads. Now, I don't know everybody in Edmond, but I know enough people that I've had conversations, and a city employee yesterday found out I was on this committee and leaned in and said, do something about the roads.
Yeah.
So, I just need to know, are you confident that we're putting enough into the roads to meet the needs of what this city is going to be facing? Not next week, but 5 years.
Yeah, so roads with the GeoBond, the resurfacing, a lot of people in Edmond are in gated, private, communities that have private roads and they pay their HOAs for their streets, right, for their resurfacing. So if I lived in a gated private community and I'm paying my HOA a lot of money to resurface my roads, what we want to do is I think with the GeoBond, we want to limit those roads to kind of the arterial roads that everybody uses that are in very bad shape. We think with the $5 million that we can get our arterial roads in addition to the other money, we can get our arterial roads into much better conditions.
Because this doubles your overlay money right now.
It does. So, yeah, we've got to make hard choices. I think that's one of them. Yes, the calls I get every day, a lot of the council members get emails all the time.
Right.
Pavement condition is a big thing. So there will be a noticeable difference though, I think if we double the spending that we're doing right now.
Just to clarify really quick, that 35 million is for a 7-year, right, and you guys did a 10-year budget.
And they, I
So it'd be
think
50.
we talked about that.
So, yeah, I'm just saying
Yeah.
that's not actually 5 million a year on a 10-year budget. That's 3.5.
Now, the question I have, that's a good question, because what if, I mean, can you actually do 5 a year till it runs out, or do you have to actually go, we said 10 years, we only do 3.5 a year?
I think that's gonna be like, that's gonna be up to city council.
Okay.
If they wanna spend 5 million a year till it
Gotcha.
runs out, that's what they can do. And some of it's like how much in bonds do you issue each year as well, so that you have available funding.
Jay?
Strategically, after we all agree on whatever the projects, the budget and everything else, is it wise for us to lower some of the dollar amounts on the individual projects and let that fall into contingency so that it gives the city staff more flexibility on these out years to not be locked into this 85% on a project or 70, or I heard some numbers that were tied to some things.
I would be more concerned that with inflation and everything, you're not gonna have enough money. I mean, I would kind of trust their estimates at this point, and if they have too much contingency, we'll roll it into available funding at some point.
But if you had contingency money for
Unlisted, yeah.
excuse me, you could help put that towards one of these to cover
You could.
inflation if they wanted to or anything.
I
just don't want to tie our hands any more than we have to because of things we don't know that are going to be in Edmond in 7 years or 8 years.
I think I personally kind of think that feels risky,
Okay.
but,
strategically, if I was managing a project like this, I would keep those in because you may have some extra contingency on these first 2 or 3 years that you're gonna need on the back 5, 6, 7 years.
So am I seeing correctly that every road project adjacent to a school is checked right now?
yeah.
But we also haven't identified road projects next to schools that weren't on this list, right?
That's correct.
There are some other school needs out there.
Yeah.
Is my point, that may or may not be on this list.
Yeah, but you also didn't check priorities 14 through 25 either.
But did you talk about trying to get $4 million in there for second coal train?
That's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's go over to the totals just really quick and talk just a little bit about. So you're, right now with the, you've got 119 million in streets, 61 million in quality of life, and 9 million in public safety. And that with a 17, almost 18% contingency gets you at 231 million. So do you want to cut it back to 200?
What's the, I
Where is
can't
that
read,
come from?
the ward allocation, does that say 766?
Yeah.
I can't read 69.
Yes.
7669.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question to the school board guys in here? I know you said you're gonna stay neutral. Does that mean you're not gonna be against this?
You talking about me personally or the school? I can't speak for the other school board members. I mean, conversations that I've had with other school board members, no one's real thrilled about it, so I can't say that I can't speak for them. I can only speak for myself.
Do you want to speak more about this stuff? I mean, I'm not putting you on the spot, Marcus, but just the idea, the infrastructure, the comments in general.
I feel as if we're on the right track because the city is we need this going through, and we need some sort of geo bond to get us up to stature at some point. And so, like, I am not comfortable with 230 million. I think it's too much. And Mr. Town can probably speak a little bit more on the strategy that Edmond Public Schools has used, but we are only doing 2-year bonds, And so asking for a 10-year all at once is a large amount in a large time. And I understand that 5 years isn't long enough, I guess, to get something done, but I would feel much more comfortable with 5 or 7 years.
Todd, is it worth looking at because we're just going to give the council a recommendation. give them two, one that is at this level and one that may be at the $156 million level, and we have to par the bottom end of these projects down, just say, here's two options for you.
Well, I think any informed recommendation by this council, this group would be valuable to the city council. They're gonna vote up or down, and 3 out of 5 of them are gonna make a decision. And so if we give them informed information that we can charge with doing, I don't believe there's a cookie cutter formula that they say, well, I want it this way. So Brad, your wisdom, I think, is really important. And I think most of us have a relationship with at least one person on there, and I think they're looking for as much helpful information as possible. So, and maybe political cover, I don't know. So I would say yes. So let me ask Kathy a question and ask everybody the most important question. It's 8:05. We have a list that exceeds what several people have said they're comfortable with. And there is now an idea of having 2 tracks to share with the city council. I need people to tell me if they want to do this until we're done tonight or come back next week, and that has to be a group decision. So I think now's a good time to talk about that.
I would like to come back.
Okay.
I think there's just too many numbers. I would like to see what we've done here in the sense, because I just want to look at it. And just have time
Can
to
we
ponder it.
start next week with just this list?
I think we can start wherever we think is most effective and efficient.
Right, yeah. I mean,
Just to
I think
whittle it down.
what I would suggest, I mean, you obviously still have all the list, the entire list of projects available to you. But we kind of focus on where we end tonight and cut it back from there if that's what the group wants to do. I am gonna just say a comment about having 2 separate recommendations.
Please.
If I were a city council person, I would not find that helpful. And I would say, you all didn't do your job, go back and do it again.
That's an ironic comment.
So, I'm just, that's just me, 40 years in city council.
Sorry. Thank you. I think it's noted for the record, Alex, Lady Chairman. So I heard what Caleb said, and I didn't hear a lot of people saying, no, I want to stay here till it's done. I will want to say this out loud. We will come back with this collective list. We will come back with a box check where it is. So please, if you have comments or convictions, even beliefs or opinions, bring those next week about items you want to be added or removed. It's not set in stone, as we know by everything we said in the last 5 minutes. And so, and most important, come with your budget in mind when you come back next week. So our agenda will look strikingly similar to the agenda we had tonight. Yes, Jennifer?
Could we do a count right now if we're on the right track? I know that some people think it's too much. I think it's where we should be, even maybe a little bit more, but could we raise our hands if we're on the right track?
I think we can. So we voted earlier, so now we have more education. So all those that think somewhere in the 230 range makes sense, raise your hand, please. Okay. And all those that think the number should be 200, raise your hand. Okay. And all those that believe the number should be lower than 200.
Jay?
No, he voted. So yeah, thank you, Jennifer. That's a wonderful idea. And Jerry, so let me say a couple things, and we have a couple more agenda items, including citizen comments. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate all of the input, the thoughts, the history, the context, whoever that is. And I would be disappointed if you didn't come with that same desire next week when we get together. And I think we had on the calendar Monday. Right?
Yes. It is Monday.
So we have a couple more agenda items. I thought I saw Kathy wanting to say something, though.
No,
Okay.
I said what I needed to say.
So it appears we're going to move items 3 and 4 until next time. We don't need to take any action, I don't believe, Casey, on that. Does anybody else have any comments before we go to agenda item number 5, which is citizen comments? Yes, Todd.
I would just like to second Kathy's comments about 2 different approaches. I really think that that's what we were asked to do, is to put together a plan.
Yeah. I don't disagree.
They can vote it up or down.
I'd encourage you to talk to maybe your city council people to see if they have any greater insight or direction as to what they want now that we're 3 weeks into this. That's probably not bad information. Anybody else before we go to citizen comments?
And I will say, the 231 in 10 years is the same as 156 in 7 years.
Thank you, Brad.
They are.
Do you know what the last bond issue for the school system was in February?
160 million. Yeah, something like that.
160, and it was, it's a 5-year bond, and they sell them for 2 years.
I'm just curious, when Marcus said that, I wasn't aware of this. All right, thank you. We're moving on to agenda items. I'm an auctioneer. Number 5, citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the General Obligation Bond Advisory Task Force. Remarks should be directed to the chair of the meeting and are limited to 3 minutes or less. Do we have any citizens who would like to make a comment tonight? Taylor, would you please go to the front of the room and introduce yourself?
I'll be brief. Less than 3 minutes. Tables. I just want to remind them, you also have, there's the CIP that will take projects that you don't put on the list. That may expire, may not, depending on the future, but those are dollars that are still coming in that will be available projects. Less dollars because sales tax are not growing. So I want to repeat that. Sales tax is not growing. And so that's a key issue from a funding of the city and understanding of the math equation.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? There was one other gentleman here, but I believe he might have left. Anybody else? Citizen comments? All right, agenda item number 6 are comments from members of the task force. Any comments for the good of the group? I'll just affirm that Jane is going to try to provide this technology. See that?
We'll send this to you.
We'll send this out. One thing to know about the file, because of the way it's built, it only works in desktop Excel. So if you try and open it in like Microsoft 365 on the internet, it's not going to function.
It doesn't open on what?
And like,
is it in Excel?
it's Excel, but you have to use like the desktop version of Excel, so on the internet.
If you have any questions, Casey and Jane, the entire city staff have been remarkable. I know when I see a lot of emails that go to them, please reach out to them if you have questions, need more information. The entire staff have been great. Chris, Steve, everybody. Thank you for Chris and Alan for being here despite his comments about me. I appreciate that. When no other members of the task force want to make comments, so I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Somebody move.
Second.
Bud, and then Marcus, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Next Monday night at 6 o'clock, right here.